I grew up in a household that was touched by religion and war. So my grandparents and my mom and my aunts immigrated here from Belarus. They were running from Stalin. He had stolen their farm, as they had stolen many people's farms, and then they popped around in refugee camps for a while in Europe, and then ended up in Ohio. They were sold tickets, and I tell you the story because um, that was part of the religion. Our religion was, at any moment things can go very badly. Now, I grew up in a very prosperous country. There I've never been to a store in up until, 10 years ago where shelves were empty. And I remember hearing these stories time and time again. We had to go share, we had sheets and we had to go try and trade them for potatoes, and we were starving. And I knew that they were real. I knew they weren't lying. But I didn't know what that meant to me until I went to a nearby mall, and one of the Macy's floors was empty. This was before the pandemic, and I was like, "That's not good. That is not what's happening." I'd never seen, just over. There was just so much over production of commercial properties that our the market wasn't sustaining. There wasn't enough demand for the supply, and now there's this empty storefront that's crazy. And so when I talk about religion, my family was then kind of indentured by a farmer in Ohio, and they couldn't get out of debt, right? They were doing the farming, but then the farmer was charging them rent, and so there was this constant debt that was being accrued. So they were always going to be farmhands for the rest of their lives. But my grandfather, probably where I get some of this kind of reverse engineering. He's like, I'm going to write a bunch of letters to a bunch of churches in America. And so he wrote a letter to a Russian Orthodox church in on the East Coast, and the church members gathered and bought their freedom, bought my family's freedom. Yes. So this idea of war could happen at any moment, famine could happen at any moment, and I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. Oof. Like I'm just because I realized that one of the religions of our family was that community is powerful, and you can change your entire life with the help of your community members. And so a lot of my aunts and uncles came from different countries. They were not blood related. I think the one unifying factor that we had is that we were all Slavic descent. They all had really funny accents, and they all spoke Russian. Like some of them spoke other things too, Ukrainian, and but they all spoke Russian. And so I thought for the longest time that I was Russian, not Belarusian. I hadn't even heard of that because my aunt from Ukraine would just, oh, we're part of the Russian American Club. So that was one part of the religion in our family. My grandfather then, years later, decided to go to the seminary. Is that what it's called, the seminary?
Yeah,
And he,
absolutely.
thank you. And he became a Russian Orthodox priest. Now, Russian Orthodox can marry. So he was already married, he had kids. And so I was raised in that church. However, it was in Russian, like all the masses, and I don't speak Russian. I've learned in my adulthood for sheer pleasure French, and I'm functional in Spanish, but I've never spoken Russian. My mom and her side of the family speaks Russian. My two siblings speak Russian, but I did not. And so I went to this church, and I was constantly there hearing these hymns and looking at the icons and knowing that there was a presence that people were talking about, but no one explained it to me. And then the next part of my religious upbringing is I nearly drowned when I was about two, maybe one and a half, two. I got away from my mom. I fell into a pool. They didn't find me until I was unconscious and not breathing. And she just kept, giving me CPR, and, my uncle screaming, it's too late, it's too late. And she just would not give up. And so after several minutes, I finally started breathing again, spent several days in the hospital. I don't remember any of that, but I think that experience somehow brought me closer to the edge of the spirit world, because I've heard this a lot with near death experiences. I have no near death experience memory. I
Okay.
just know that growing up, from as long as I remember, I've always, like, you say that you believe in the spirit of all things. I would talk to my animals. I would talk to stuffed animals. I would talk to plants. It was just what I did. I was always looking for God. And I got a bit of that in the smell of the incense in the beautiful hymns that they were singing, but I was so far removed from anyone explaining it to me. So, does that answer your question in terms of is it a religious family? In some ways, very much so. And in other ways, I wasn't taught anything. I just experienced it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, what I was thinking was, did you call yourself an alternative health care practitioner?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. I mean, I just wish, you know, it wasn't an alternative.
Yes.
Those I wish those modalities weren't alternative. Because it just doesn't sound, it just, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's another podcast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think, having an experience like that at such a young age, um, being unconscious or maybe even dead for a few minutes, like who knows,
Yeah.
you know, somatic work and the body. And so here you are, so little that memory is encoded in you somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And, you might not consciously understand it, but it's in there. And, either like your child self already made peace with it because children are so resilient and
Mm.
they can like brush things off. They're like, whatever, I don't know what, let's go play again, Um, when it's kind of like when you get older and you're like, oh, that was really, and you kind of internalize the trauma, it finds a deeper foothold inside your body, and then you're like, I gotta see someone for some somatic work. But children are like, what, I was unconscious, what, who cares, is that ice cream, let me have some. um you know I am a big believer in somatic work. I'm a
Mm.
big believer in trauma or stories or what have you, finding little, you know, cracks and crevices or muscles in the body in which to hide and kind of
Mm-hmm.
lurk. So I suspect that probably that experience, because you're a child and you're resilient, it's probably not lurking the same way if an adult had the same experience.
That's
But
right.
still, it's still, I think, at a very innate level, at a very deep level, created this form of resiliency inside of you that is possibly mind blowing.
I would absolutely agree with that because it is surprising the amount of resilience that I have. And I was terrified of water for a year or two. I remember not having any memory of anything except I used to always be terrified to take a bath or a shower. And I constantly would ask my mom, it's not going to go up my nose, is it? It's not going to go up my nose. So there was definitely something that I remembered. And even now, if I'm alone in a pool, I'm like, this is not the best place for me to be. I'll still swim because I think that resilience has come to me through, like, I'm still going to live. And I think that maybe getting that close to death allowed me to go, well, I'm here for a reason. And so I might as well do it. And so I have a bit more courage uh, than I think I would have had that not had that experience not existed for me.
Yeah.